president of the Board of Directors for the League of Canadian Poets, as well as an assistant professor here at MacEwan University in the Arts and Cultural Management Department, which is how this kind of came to be here and came together. I'm also a poet with a long history here in Edmonton and a good friend of our speaker tonight, Titilope. I'm going to just give you a few little details, a few little thanks before we welcome Titi to the stage. And I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. So we do acknowledge that the land on which we gather in Treaty 6 territory is the traditional gathering place for many Indigenous people. We honor and respect the history, languages, ceremonies, and cultures of the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who call this territory home. The First Peoples' connection to the land teaches us about our inherent responsibility to protect and respect Mother Earth. With this acknowledgement, we honor the ancestors and children who have been buried here, missing and murdered Indigenous women and men, and the process of ongoing collective healing for all human beings. We are reminded that we are all treaty people and of the responsibility that we have to one another. We also acknowledge that tonight's event is being live streamed across Canada and beyond, and is being viewed on the traditional lands of many different Indigenous groups. We encourage you to learn more about the history of Indigenous people in your area. MacEwan University, Keowastin, is a wonderful source of information and education on Indigenous matters local to Edmonton. We have also found websites whose.land and native/land.ca are extremely helpful resources in learning more about the complex and vibrant Indigenous histories in many parts of the world. So the League of Canadian Poets is Canada's only national professional poetry organization. The League supports events, networking, projects, publications, mentoring, and awards. We serve poets and we work to develop a larger audience and readership for poetry. We work to provide greater opportunities for poets and to show readers of all ages how powerful and accessible poetry can be. Members of the League are professional poets who are actively contributing to the development, the growth, and the public profile of poetry in Canada. Arts and Cultural Management meets at the intersection between business and arts. In the Arts and Cultural Management program major here at MacEwan, students learn the foundational skills to successfully lead and manage an arts or cultural organization or an individual artist's career. The program focuses on the unique and innovative settings inherent in the arts and cultural organizations, with courses adapted specifically for that sector. We are quite thrilled to partner with the League to bring the Anne Szumigalski Lecture to our university and to our students. So I'm very thrilled beyond measure, actually, to introduce our lecturer for this evening. Titilope Sonuga is a Nigerian-Canadian poet, playwright, and performer who has captured hearts across the globe. She is a leading voice in the global literary community with work that dazzles from page to stage. Her poetry concert, Open, has shown to sold-out audiences in the UK, in Canada, in South Africa, and Nigeria. She is the author of 3 collections of poetry and 3 spoken word albums. And she is also a playwright, having just written an opera. Titilope has made history as the first poet to perform at a Nigerian presidential inauguration, and she was the 9th poet laureate of the city of Edmonton. I could quite frankly go on and on about her accolades and her as a person, but I will leave it there and welcome Titi to the stage.
Good evening, everyone, while you awkwardly watch me set up. I am humbled to have been invited to give this lecture in honor of a poet whose life and work had such a profound impact that is still felt today. Standing here in the lineage of writers and thinkers I have loved and admired is a supreme privilege. I am shaking in my boots. I'm still and always in awe that the words that come out of my mouth take meaningful shape in the world. It is a blessing to be received with such generosity, so thank you all for sharing this evening with me. I want to do a vibe check. In the performance world, it's a moment to see if you and the audience are in sync. Tonight is September 21st, and I think the ultimate call and response, if I say, "Do you remember?" The vibes are okay. The vibes are okay. We're almost there. She steps into the spotlight and takes a deep theatrical bow, her sequin top catching the light as she moves, sure-footed to the podium. The applause feels like it's the end, but she is only just getting started. She applauds the audience back, as if to say, we are about to make something beautiful together. At the microphone, she sings, "I open my mouth to the Lord and I won't turn back, no, I will go, I shall go to see what the end is gonna be." From the open mouth of the poet, a new unknown path emerges from which there is, as she sings, no turning back. And so, her first poem starts as though it had already begun years before she arrived on this stage. Maya Angelou is live and unplugged. It is 1987, and an audience of several thousand has gathered to hear her. She is a poet untethered from the page. Glancing only occasionally at the text on the podium, she delivers comedy and profound insights on race. She teases about sex and love. From folk songs to poems, the audience in lockstep, she tells them, this is not any old poetry reading. With the poet as guide, they travel the breadth of emotion, joy, sorrow, laughter, and awe, as she insists that poetry is called, in her words, to be magical, mystical, lyrical, and musical. To end her set, she arrives at a well-known poem called Still I Rise, a call and response classic. Each defiant line of survival against all odds is followed by the refrain, I rise, until the final lines, bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the hope and the dream of the slave. Here, the expected last lines give way to something else, something pure. She claps 3 times, then pointing into the stratosphere, lets out a joyful shout and says instead, there I go. She leaves the stage just as she entered, bowing to ovation. This is the performance edit, a necessary departure from the original text because the spirit of the evening demands it, because in this moment of co-creation with this particular audience, this is the ending the poem deserves. This is poet as rock star, the poem's last lines tossed into the audience like worn-out guitar. In her claps is the codified call and response of Black girl game songs, our double Dutch and hopscotch, what is written in the rhythm of 10-10, the wild leaping of ampe, the balancing act of suwe, poems spoken to the rhythm of joy. This is oral tradition stretching like a complex web of jump ropes linking continent to diaspora. With this poem in a book in my hand, I would meet Maya Angelou in Edmonton, my family having skipped that jump rope to arrive in this city. Here, I would plug the gaps in my school curriculum and devour the words of Toni Morrison, Sonia Sanchez, Ntasaki Shange, and Miss Maya Angelou. While my head was buried in a book, the longing, the hunger of my youth would be temporarily satiated. Their voices jumping off the page to meet the one inside my head, a dialogue that rooted me in my skin. I'm standing before her now because I won a poetry contest. Deadline at midnight, submitted somewhere around 11:58 because my chaos is part of my magic. The poem is a long outpouring of the heart, not a single line break in sight. It won, and I could not believe my luck. Backstage, she held my hand, smiling gently, pulling my name slowly and considered from her mouth. I want so desperately to fill the silence that follows. I chuckle maniacally and immediately chastise myself. My voice is too loud and shrill in my head. I'm nervous. You laugh a lot, she says. I like that. I don't trust people who don't laugh. The old twinkle in her eyes is still there, catching light. And later on the stage of the Winspear Center, she is still magical, mystical, lyrical, and musical. Seated now, oxygen tank beside her. At 84 years old, she delivers an hour, or was it 2? I cannot remember. The details are lost in the fog of her magic. I do remember, not knowing the line between when one poem ended and another began. In the magnetic presence of a poet whose work was so embodied that she had become herself a poem, I felt, in the wild currents of my own becoming, buoyed. That night, I named the thing I wanted to be, a poet as a verb, a way of doing and being, how I wanted my work to move in the world with a beating heart, agile and limber, something with wings. Just 2 years before she would say her final goodnight to this life, she called out to the audience of over 1,000 of us, and something inside of me leapt forward in response. Oriki is Yoruba praise poetry that celebrates a person as an individual who exists within a lineage. The talking drum with its own language, a sound imitating speech, is sometimes played alongside the recitation. Your Ori, your head swells as it is greeted with a series of names, attributes that edify are chanted to invoke both who you are and who you will become. The past in dialogue with the present and future in the poetry of you. In the words of Alice Walker, how simple a thing it seems to me that to know ourselves as we are, we must know our mother's names. This form of record keeping and futurescaping spans the African continent and the globe, in cultures where the oral and written word developed in parallel. In cultures with little interaction with the text, poems were spoken in blocks of repetition to aid memorization, verses sung or spoken, melodies for remembrance so that one generation was always reaching for the next. In ancient Egypt, the pyramid text etched into subterranean walls comprised poems as spells and instructions, written to be spoken, to be chanted, a ritual for burial, instructions for flying, leaping or climbing into the afterlife, a two-purpose communication intended to steward the dead and comfort the living, a dialogue spanning millennia. What we uncover in the dust is an echo. Poetry is a conversation between past and future expressed in the ever-present now. There is a necessary distance between what was first written and what it communicates centuries later. That distance is called life. It clarifies and distills. It allows the written or spoken word to grow alongside us like a child whose oriki is many lives long. A poem takes on the attributes of every mouth it passes through. It is colored by every finger that grazes the page, a dynamic edit, made by the living, for those left behind to translate what was etched in stone, on clay, what was spoken or sung. In West Africa, a Jale is a poet, historian, and storyteller, often referred to as griot, transliteration between French and Portuguese meaning servant, but the Jale's true root word is blood, to signify an inherited lineage, a sacred gift passed down by bloodline. They sometimes entertain, sometimes mediate, but the Jale's main responsibility is to keep the history of a people alive. This is poet as living archive. We survive through the stories we tell, so it matters who gets to tell them. We are wounded by the stories we don't tell, so it matters who is erased in the silence, who falls through the line breaks of history. Stories are made, then made living by the world into which they are offered. I speak in this room, and a million possibilities in your body make it so that these words reach you. You answer back with each breath, each head nod, your laughter, your eyes glistening, catching light to illuminate the unknown path we started on when I first opened my mouth. In this way, I am not alone up here. We are making something beautiful together. This communal act of storytelling is who we have always been. Through it emerged our religions, our scripture, our culture, the rituals and myths that propelled humanity forward. First, we set our hands to stone and carved out the tools for our survival, then forged ahead into marvels of engineering. But before the stone, there was a story. The story one person told the other about possibility. In the beginning, there was a word, and so I offer my controversial submission as a professional yapper that storytelling was the first and most significant technological advancement. There's a story in the book of Genesis about the origins of us, humanity with a common language, a singular tongue. In their clear and uninterrupted understanding of each other, these people decided to build. They began to stack their bricks toward heaven in competition with God, who looked down and said, "Look, they are one people and they have one language. And this is only the beginning of what they will do. Nothing that they propose to do will be impossible for them." And God, who saw their unending thirst for immortality, confounded their tongues, made them babble beyond each other's comprehension, and so they fractured, left their quest for the sky, scattered all over the world where new languages and customs remain. We know what a word can do. We know who a word can undo. The best and worst of us has emerged from the mouths of the most charismatic storytellers who struck a particular chord in the minds of millions. We reach for poems in our protest. We reach for stories in our mourning. We speak poems as prayer over the dust of our final resting places. We write them into our vows and promise each other a forever of stories. The first love language we teach our children is the gift of rhyme. At its best, there is a healing alchemy in a word. Poetry is magical, mystical, lyrical, and musical. A gift created in community, for community. The spirit of our call and response is in our blues, rock and roll, our high life, reggae, and soca. It is the enduring force in the work songs carried in the mouths of enslaved people from the continent to plantations across the globe. Art is a conversation moving across cultures, across time. Each iteration we make perfects a previous attempt. One artist evolving the dialogue, one advancement at a time. I believe that what we do here exists in perfect cycles. One living thing calls out to another, all of us held within this balance, all of us offering our call into the world, not knowing who will respond. What did Shakespeare know of me? A girl in Lagos, in Edmonton. What did Toni Morrison, Maya Angelou, Lauryn Hill, Tracy Chapman, and Sade Adu know of me? How could they know that their words were the poems I carved into the subterranean walls of my own adolescence, where I was almost buried alive? But their instructions for flying, for climbing, for leaping into my womanhood allowed me to emerge whole. What does any writer know but the silence of the empty page before the first word? What are they attempting to say except, is there anyone out there? To the dust being blown off hieroglyphs, is there anyone out there to a young poet clutching a dog-eared book? December 5th, 1976. Bob Marley, 2 days after being shot in his home, performs a 90-minute set to an audience of 80,000 people at the Smile Jamaica concert. His wife, Rita Marley, sings backup, still in her hospital gown, having only been discharged hours earlier. It is said that there were over 200 people on the stage that night, acting as a human shield for the voice of a revolution. He opens the concert with War, a song whose lyrics are pulled from the speech by Ethiopia's Emperor Haile Selassie. The audience echoes back the word war. He grimaces as he performs passion or pain or both, but we feel him. He sings until there are no longer first-class and second-class citizens of any nation, until the color of a man's skin is of no more significance than the color of his eyes, me say war. Until the philosophy which holds one race superior and another inferior is finally and permanently discredited and abandoned, everywhere is war. Me say war. Shuhada Sarakat, Sinead O'Connor, would answer this call in 1992, the SNL performance that changed everything. Sung this time without music, just words spoken like an antiphon, a Christian ritual, yet in this performance edit, she inserts new lyrics, her message coming to a climax by ripping up a picture of Pope John Paul II. She is taking to task child abuse in the Catholic Church. Her 3.5-minute performance ends in silence. She blows out the candles in front of her, the end of a prayer, and leaves the stage, entering a torrent of abuse and a career freefall that she never fully recovered from. Art requires courage to speak and brace for the equal and opposite force of the response. Only in death did we hear her. Only by looking back did we see her. Bob Marley ends his set that evening with Keep On Moving. He sings, Lord, I've got to keep on moving. Lord, I've got to get down. They're coming after me. Lord, I've got to keep on moving. Where I can't be found, Lord, they're coming after me. At this point in the performance, he is pouring sweat. His eyes closed, his head upturned toward the sky in a transcendent moment. There is no separation between artist and a people with a shared pain and grief. There is a clear dialogue between Marley and his country. An existing lyric takes on new meaning. In the performance edit, words are stressed differently, and the body is an instrument that conveys new meaning. He is speaking to the powers that be, shadow figures who orchestrated the shooting, and he is not interested or afraid of their response. Sign language interpreter Amber Gallagher stands on the side of the stage at a Twista concert. Twista is an American rapper who once held the Guinness World Record as the world's fastest English-speaking rapper. He performs at rapid-fire pace. Amber's hands cut through the air, keeping time. She engages her whole body. her face flush with emotion, becomes so magnetic that Twista becomes audience to his own performance of his own music, spoken in another tongue. He leaves center stage to join her in an improvised duet. One language with its own grammar and syntax meets another with fervor. They co-create a portal, a door to another dimension, and the audience, in a wave of euphoria, jumps through. My father started losing his vision several years ago. There's a line from John Green's The Fault in Our Stars that says, "I fell in love like you would falling asleep. I fell in love like you would fall asleep, slowly, and then all at once." It felt a lot like that. But at the end of his love story was lingering shadows and then pitch black. Now he says he knows which one of us is coming by the sound of our footsteps, whose ankles click, whose heavy-footed thumbs shake the house. He communicates with all of his other senses heightened now, the spoken word, a guide through which he navigates the world. He reaches for what the darkness could not take, an old love, the call and response antiphony of classical music, the mastery of Bach and Mozart. He reaches for jazz, the high life music of his youth, and suddenly the world bursts into color once again. I'm fascinated by moments like this in performance, moments of wonder, or that delicate transition from what was rehearsed into something else. I pore over footage of artists at the height of their craft, combing through what they left behind. I'm searching for that moment of liftoff, the fine point of transcendence. I polished my craft in cafes and bars, dimly lit lounges where the clinging of glasses and falling beer bottles were the music that accompanied my poems. I performed in audiences that would rather have been anywhere else. People who were in the room to forget their problems, not to be reminded of all the problems of the world by an earnest poet. I once read poems to an audience with their backs turned to me. Just once, never again. There have, of course, been moments that felt like my feet left the ground for a split second. No matter what kind of room I'm in, I approach the performance in the same way. I find a consistent hum and place myself within it. My work is in how quickly I can draw the chatter down into a hush. I try not to rush. I find a rhythm in the noise. I resist the urge to get louder than it. I get quieter instead, more still, create a hum with my voice that snakes through the room, touching one shoulder and the next, catching one person and then the next, and then the people begin to self-regulate. One person nudges the person beside them, and another, and suddenly we are together. And I know I have maybe the next 30 seconds to hold them still, to keep them in this conversation with me for as long as I need, or lose them forever. Sometimes it works, many times it doesn't. I have carried my bruised ego back home and back to the drawing board many nights. I've learned that there is nothing more refining as an artist than knowing that you are not the center of the universe. It is a humbling realization that allows you to appreciate even 3 minutes of listening, the life-affirming privilege of being heard. The poem begins for me in the body, a complete knowing. Writing is translation, an attempt to remember clearly, to invent a way back. I get it as close as possible and perfect the work on the page. Memorization is how I render the poem back to its rightful place, back into my body. I speak the words out loud and honor the order of things, reunifying the poem with myself. Kudus Onikeku is a Nigerian movement artist who is a master at his craft. He places dance firmly within the historical context of call and response traditions. We shared a stage in Lagos one afternoon. an improvised performance in which I spoke and Kudus moved like conjuring, wrapping his body around everywhere the words hung in the air. The power of collaboration is that it elevates. Watching him move so freely and intuitively set me free from all attempt at perfection. We were aiming for something higher, a superior understanding of the work. The audience all around us, both within and outside this performance, that had turned conversation, that had turned communion. Afterward, I asked him, "Did you feel that?" I was grasping for the words, trying to explain. There's a moment when I'm on stage. The audience goes from a buzz to a gentle hum to something beyond silence. And I too am both inside and outside myself. For a moment, we ride a wave together, our breath almost synchronized. I know that we have somehow, I pause for a moment finding the words, agreed, Kudu says. Ashe. We call it Ashe. The Yoruba believe that Ashe is a gift given by the Creator to everything on the earth. Humans, animals, plants, rocks, and rivers, all existence depends upon it. Ashe. The power, authority, and energy to create that which has been spoken. I roll the word around in my mouth. A small seed. In it is a magical, mystical, lyrical, and musical lineage. And if I open my mouth just right, I can feel it begin to bloom. Thank you. Thank you.
So much. There we go. Thank you so much. That was phenomenal. I wanted to just keep sitting in my seat to like let us all keep absorbing it. And then I got worried that you were like, that you would worry that no one was doing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much. We have some time for some audience questions. And so I'm wondering, I do have one to get the ball rolling, but if anyone has a question, a burning question after that experience, it wasn't just a lecture, it was an experience. Okay, I will let you think on your questions, but I will be coming back to you. So my question to you is, I mean, your whole lecture was sort of a call to these poets, but my question is to the poets who are asking, is anyone out there, and having difficulty hearing a response, what do you say to them? Your microphone is still on also.
I think no matter how long you've been writing poetry, if you're a new poet who's writing your first poem or a poet who has books and things, there is, I think, always this sense of being unsure if anyone is listening at all. But I think the impetus to write is to respond to that initial call that comes from in here, the desire to put something on the page or speak something into the world. My advice would be just keep speaking, keep writing, because I found that there is a world of people, a tribe of people who need the thing that you have to say, desperately in fact. And so the world is a noisy place. There are a million voices going at the same time. It often feels like you're lost and all of that. But I insist that for every call, there's an equal response. So write your thing, do your thing in the way that only you can, and your people will find you eventually.
I have such goosebumps. Just full body chills right now. Okay, audience friends, yes, I'm coming to you with the microphone.
Thank you. I really love, whoa, that is so, is this okay? Is that, okay, I guess I hear myself. I really love the concept of writing as translation and bringing the poem back into its rightful place, into your body. And I've been thinking a lot lately about embodiment and creativity and the relationship between that. And I'm curious to know about your process with that and how you've connected, you know, your mind, body, heart, soul, like how that process has been for you as an artist and as a translator.
As a translator. Yeah, I think the poem begins, like I said, for me on the page. Like I very much, I'm in love with writing poetry. And I think when you perform poetry and you speak poetry, there's this sense that you just appeared at the microphone and you're freestyling in some way, which is a way. You know, some poets are brilliant at that. But the work starts on the page in that way. It's like I'm trying to translate this thing inside my head, this feeling that I know completely. I'm trying to find a language perfect enough to reflect that. I write it down. I do the edits. I do the edit. But for me, the final edit is when that work meets the world. I call it the performance edit repeatedly because there is something to saying the words in a room full of people. It refines you as a poet. It clarifies the work. It makes it more something. You know, like it makes it more of itself. And I often memorize, like I said, to somehow reinsert the poem inside my body so that when I'm in the room with the people, I can be there fully. I can be there inside of the poem. And that for me is the most rewarding feeling. It feels like I've left the ground, like I said. Like there is to me something really magical in that moment. Yeah.
Thank you. I loved that phrase, performance edit. It took me a second to realize what it meant, and then when I did, obsessed. I loved it.
Thank you.
Other questions? I think I see a timid hand back there.
Hi, Titi.
Hi.
So I've been thinking a lot about, especially this year, around.
Regine.
Yeah, it's me. Sorry.
It's dark, but I know the
and
voice.
I'm also masked.
Hello.
I've just been thinking a lot about the heaviness that a lot of people are going through, especially this year.
Yeah.
The global grief and the rage and everything else that makes it hard to grasp at hope.
Mm-hmm.
What advice would you give to a writer who is struggling to write through it and navigating just the uncertainty of what to put down on paper?
There is, in my opinion, no obligation to write through it. It's okay to rest. It's okay to be enraged and in pain and unable to find the words right now. There can be, in my opinion, time between the complex reality that we live in and when the words actually come, if the words actually come at all. We're not required to constantly be producing something, you know? And so the writer's work is to be a human being, you know, to experience all of it as it is right now, and to offer yourself rest when you can, and leave the obligation to write or create for a future time beyond now. Now is for recovery and rest. We've just survived a few years of complete chaos. I'd be shocked if you were able to immediately start writing after that. I think rest is okay too. And eventually the words will find you.
Thank you so much. The next question, conveniently, is one seat over.
Hi. You said the words, "We are wounded by the stories we don't tell," and that really, I felt that. And so I guess my first question is, I want to put that at the start of my book. Is that okay?
With credit, yes.
Of course. And also, just, I would be so interested to have you expand on that and give an example of a story that you've told that would have wounded you or others had it not been told.
Now I'm wondering, do I want to share that with Master with this particular I think shame is a very powerful thing if we let it be. And the wounding happens in how long you hold a thing in your body before you actually say it out loud. So, I mean, rather than offering a million stories that I have not told that have spent years wounding me, I would say probably everybody in this audience has a wound created by a secret that was kept, by a story that wasn't told. And then globally, there's this experience of voices of people that have been silenced and their stories that haven't been told. And how that wounds us as humanity. Yeah, there's a story I'm thinking of, but I don't know if this is, maybe after we will talk. But I think all of us have this experience of all the words that we've left unsaid. Yeah.
Thank you. I saw Alice's hand up. Sorry, I'm sitting down. Now I'm standing up. Just narrating my movements.
Thank you so much. This has been wonderful listening to you.
Thank you.
The question I have is maybe just a little bit more technical, not quite technical, but it's about that sense of sometimes a disconnect between how powerful something can be on a page and whether or not it can actually be voiced with that much authority on the stage. And I just wonder if you ever feel there are things that don't read well but do work when you've written them, and the other way around.
Absolutely, yeah. Not every single thing I've ever written has been performed. Yeah, because there is that sense, and I guess that's the beauty of the written text, is that people get to take that with them and experience that again and again. Performance is transient in that we're in this room right now and then soon we'll all be gone. I absolutely do agree that there are some poems that exist on the page in ways that are difficult to translate by speaking them in performance. And so I guess I offer that there is a performance that's happening on the page also, beyond the spoken word, and then that's left to the readers of the work to feel and experience.
Thank you. Brianne has a question.
So you have written books, moved into poetry albums, performance, live performance. We have books here of yours, but plug. But when we think about call, is there a sense that you're aware of in what calls you to move from book to album to, opera?
I'm just out here on vibes, Rhian. Pure vibes. And I'm gonna sound very woo-woo when I say this, but I'm gonna say it anyway. For me, there is a deep spiritual connection to my work. I left a career in engineering on what felt like spiritual instruction. Like, it just felt like I could hear it clearly and it was time to go. And I hold that in my pocket everywhere I go and in everything I do, in that I go where the love is. I love telling stories. I love what is happening, and like, I just love all of it. Hearing stories, sharing stories, listening, being inside of the stories. And I'm not a purist in the sense that I'm a poet who writes for the page and it's this precious thing. I think there are many ways to be a poet. And my thing is, I'm like, poetry everywhere all at once. You know, like, I want to read poems on the back of a cereal box or in a fortune cookie. I think everywhere we are telling stories, a poet should be, in my opinion. So when I get a commission to write an opera, I say yes because I'm delulu enough to believe I can do it. And if I have an opportunity to work with music, I say yes because that is also poetry, that is also a story that's being told. And so when I say I move on vibes, I mean that truly I go in the direction of what excites and sometimes terrifies me. I move in the direction of what feels most urgent to me, and I'm not confined by the medium necessarily. I want to experience all of it, you know, and so it's why I have such a complicated history with publishing, but we'll sidebar that later on. Because at times it's difficult, you know, back to what Alice said, it's difficult to translate, to go between. But it is why in one breath I'm recording a spoken word album, and in the other I'm writing a collection of poems, and in the other I'm writing the libretto for an opera, and in the other I'm writing an ad for a brand of some sort, because if it's exciting and meaningful to me, I want to explore that. And in the very least, I'll know, oh, I'm never going to do that again. But yeah, I go where feels like an open door I walk through. Yeah.
This is the room for woo responses anyway.
All right, so this is my woo-woo
gold.
tribe. I like it.
I had another question back here.
Hey, Titi,
Hello.
my question is really about music, and the first question is, I already know the answer to that. I bet you and everybody in this room has wept listening to music, right? Yeah. And I guess I'm wondering how it works for you when the music and the words come together.
I've done, quite a few collaborations with music, and I write to very loud music. There's something about the pure connection to that melody that like gets me going, I guess. There's for me a natural musicality in the way that we speak when we're talking in conversation or reciting a poem. And so when I'm working with music, I'm listening for that. Of course, again, the work begins on the page, write the poem, edit the poem, make the poem, da-da-da-da. And then there's another experience of entering another world now with its own language, with its own conventions, and trying to find where those two things merge. And I've had the honor and privilege of collaborating with some masters at what they do, who are in tune with the words enough to know where to go next, and I've learned a lot from them, and can create intuitively in that way, knowing, just like I say, you know, a singer has like a perfect pitch, like they know where that particular is. I think for a poet who speaks their work, there's also that thing, that key, and every attempt in the work that I do with music is to get to that And so I just try to find the meeting point of the cadence of the words and what the music is doing, and I rely very heavily on composers and creators who teach me their language, you know.
Thank you. I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. I see a hand over there. So that's where I'm going to go first.
Okay, sorry. First of all, I just want to say I really love the way you speak.
Thank you.
It's very like clear and eloquent, and even like when you're answering questions, it's very like musical in a way. Like there's like a rhythmic tone that like I really like.
Thank you.
But one question that I would say is for a lot of younger people, like especially younger Africans and Nigerians, what is like a piece of advice or knowledge you would say to those who grew up in Canada or just like in the West in general, that as they get older struggle to understand their culture, and I guess in a way like how to find meaning in, you know, their like in back home, in terms of like tradition, heritage, and
Yeah. Thank you. My family moved here when I was 13, so I was like a fully formed, almost fully formed being, with a different sort of connection to home. But I have a ton of friends who were either born here or whose families arrived here when they were much younger, who then find themselves, and in many ways I do too, because I've now spent more of my life in Canada than in Nigeria, right? So find themselves in this complicated midpoint of home not quite being here or there, and feeling of this loss of true connection. I think we are in a lucky time in that we are more connected now than we ever were before. And so as a young Nigerian here in Edmonton or Canada who has a desire to connect with home, there are a lot of ways to do that now that maybe there weren't before. There is an online community that is massive. There's movies that are coming out of Nigeria. There is literature and music, and I don't think those are superficial things. I think we've talked today about how art illuminates and clarifies, and I think being able to connect to art is actually a really powerful way through. I think also it is two things. One, it is important to acknowledge that who you are is who you are. So this idea that you are any less of it simply because you don't have that physical connection to the land, I think is untrue. And I think remembering that is important, knowing that you may not speak the language, but you still are. You may not understand certain cultural contexts, but you still are, and insisting upon that. And also finding community here. I always joke, my husband and I talk about when we moved to Edmonton, I felt like I knew every Nigerian because it was just, you know, a handful. But now I'm at the grocery store and people are speaking Yoruba and I'm just thinking, all right, let's go, you know? And I think it's really beautiful that those connections can exist even here. And those communities can be built here because of the ways of the world, so many of us are here now. And so you can build that community here, but also travel if that is accessible to you. When my family moved here when I was 13. The first time I went back home, I was 23. And so I was like, you know, a woman now. But I went home, and that, it did something to me. It rooted me really, really in my skin in a brand new way. And so if you have the privilege of travel of being able to go home, then do, you know. But I mean, I think it's a lifelong pursuit, this idea of home and what your identity is and who you are. And maybe your identity isn't one or the other. Maybe you are this mishmash of all the things that make you you. And that too is relevant and legitimate. That too is powerful, and it's okay.
Thank you so
You're welcome.
much. I think that's all the time we have for questions. I have a few more boring words to say, but
Sure.
you are in these beautiful shoes that look very not comfortable to keep standing in. So if we could give one more round of applause.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. My name is Nick Brewer. I'm the Artistic Programming Director at the League of Canadian Poets. And I had a script, but it's not here. So I'm here to say, it's all right, don't worry about it. So I'm just here to say a huge thank you to Titilope for giving us this lecture. And I mean, like, I know you give a talk, but I mean, it really felt like a gift. So thank you so very much. Thank you to Rayanne for making this in-person event possible. This is the League's first in-person event since we all stopped having in-person events. And it's a real gift to be able to share this space with poets and poetry lovers, and perhaps future poetry lovers. Maybe you're not there yet, but now you are, because how could you not be after that? I also want to thank the supporters of the League who make work like this possible for us. So the Canada Council for the Arts and the Ontario Arts Council both provide vital funding to the League in order for us to be able to deliver programming like this, and like our awards and poetry pause and all of the various things that we do to hype up poetry in Canada. And so a huge thank you to our government funders, and then also to our individual supporters and our partners and sponsors who make all of this work possible. I won't continue talking at you, but we do have a table set up just outside that has a bit of information about the League. It will have me, and it also has some of Titi's books available for purchase. And we're also, several of the League team are here milling about, so if you'd like to know more about us, you can flag any of us down. And I'm not sure how long Titi plans on hanging around, but perhaps if you wanted to share some particularly kind or gushing words, she might be open to it. And so I will wrap this up, and thank you again, thank you everyone for coming out, and thank you again, Titilope.